Wow, would you look at that? JP Morgan and Chase is making a move to prevent religious and political debanking. This is very bizarre because every time that I want to learn about reality, I go to the fact checkers, to the authoritative sources, and I remember that CNN was saying that debanking doesn't happen. It just doesn't exist. I remember people on the BBC laughing at Nigel Farage. Like when he even mentioned the word debanking, it amused them. Like such a thing only existed in fairy tales, in conspiracy theories. It wasn't real. And so why would JP Morgan and Chase waste money and resources to prevent something that's not happening, huh? In reality, of course, debanking is real, and it was used by activist group in order to push for stuff that wouldn't get passed by legislation. And so if you had like a political opponent like Nigel Farage that was dangerous to the establishment, not to the average people, you can't really do anything legal to him, right? And it makes you look bad if you try to crack down on him. It makes you look like Russia rather than the prestigious democracy that the United Kingdom allegedly is. And so isn't it a lot easier if the banks just shut down his accounts and then he doesn't have money to do the political organizing that requires funds? Right? Like, that doesn't it make your nation look a lot more democratic if the political opponents just happen to get debanked? And they get debanked for hate speech, you know? It basically is like, look, we, the government, we got nothing against you. Like, you can say whatever you want, you know? We're not going to do anything against you. But if the banks decide to debank you, well, that's not our fault, you know? Like, take it with the banks. It's their business. Now the thing that's really interesting is that we live in a society where it's almost impossible to live without the banks. Like, if you want to live a life without the banks, at least in my country, for instance, it's extremely difficult. Why? Because there is legislation that forces you to make online transactions. If I'm not mistaken, I think like everything in Romania that costs more than around $1,000 has to go through a bank. So like if you want to buy a house, right, goes to a bank. If you want to buy a car, has to go through a bank, right? Like all of these transactions, they have to go through a bank. And so like if you're a person that just doesn't want to use banks, you can't. And so like this system cannot coexist with debanking if you want a free society. Either the government stops forcing people to work with the banks, or the government forces the banks to work with the people. You can't have either or. Like it's obvious what they're trying to do. Like they're trying to launder the authoritarianism through the private sector. And they did this with Twitter. When Elon Musk came up with the Twitter files, a lot of people were censored because the government required to. And it's even more insidious than that. Like when you look at why Elon Musk actually went to war with Brazil, yes, the country, Brazil, it was because the Brazilian government not only requested censorship, but they requested it under the table and they demanded it so that Elon Musk does it in a way that doesn't connect it to Brazil. In other words, like they wanted to appear like, no, we're a democracy. Like we're not going to crack down on political opponent. It's just that the political opponent in question just violated the terms of service on Twitter. I mean, what can you do, right? Like, there's just nothing you can do about it. And so people notice this, and they're absolutely fed up with it. And now JP Morgan and Chase is adding to their diversity and inclusion statement, I think, that religious and political views are now protected, not just for the customers, but for the people working at these banks as well. I don't know how, though, because some of them may be conflicting with each other. Like, for instance, if you have a religious person that shows up at the workplace and he refuses to use the correct pronouns for a colleague that's trans, right? That's labeled as transphobia. Like, even though, you know, he's not going out of his way in order to try to use like slurs or insults towards the trans person, him as a religious person can say, well, I'm not convinced that this person is of a different gender. And so I cannot lie. God would punish me if I say a lie. Right? So it's like a religious conviction That's like, well, I'm not convinced. Like my senses tell me that the person in front of me is a man that just is dressing up as a woman, but like I'm not going to use different pronouns because I don't think it's accurate, right? So like that's his religious belief. Meanwhile, the trans person is claiming that this is transphobic, like him not using the correct pronouns and not being part of the gender ideology and all of that is transphobic. So how is the bank going to solve this conflict? Right? Because like theoretically they have to protect both. And it's not just religion, apparently it's political as well. Again, you have a trans person at the office, and then you have a Republican at the office that says, yeah, I do think that trans ideology should be banned from the public sector. I support the MAGA movement, blah, blah, blah. How do you deal with that? Obviously, it's going to cause a little bit of conflict, right? It depends, will people know how to be adults, or will there be activists that just want to be cheeky little shits? I think that if they want to be cheeky little shits, it's too soon. It's way too soon to be a cheeky little shit. And so if you fuck around with stuff like that, you're going to find out. But still, it's an interesting change in the code of conduct. I personally don't think it's enough. I mean, it's a step in the right direction, but it's not enough. Why is it not enough? Because usually when the banks have debanked someone, they don't give the actual reason for the debanking. Because if they were to give the actual reason for the debanking, they could get sued. And wasn't there like payment processors or banks? I forgot like what exactly happened, but it was with Kanye West. He was selling a t-shirt that had a swastika on it, right? And it was obvious like why he got debanked, but they were trying to lie about it. Like they didn't want to say that it's the April or no. Like they were saying, oh, we're afraid of some scam or whatever. Like, they rarely give the reason for the debanking. They will just say, we just don't want to do business with you. You violated terms of service, right? They don't say which terms, they don't say what. And so, again, like, in a world where you're forced to work with the banks, that's not enough. Like, that's not satisfactory. And so, there should be a law that forces banks to state the actual reason on why the person has been debanked. And there should be a way to file an appeal with a tertiary person, with a mediator, something like that, where if you believe, like, hold on a little bit, I've been wrong, like I just posted a meme and apparently like this bank is enraged, or maybe there's like a third party that's pressuring the bank in order to debank me, and I don't think that this is correct. And this would protect the banks as well, by the way. Like if there are activists pressuring a bank to debank something, then that's something, the bank itself can go like, no, we can't do it, it's illegal. Like, we're going to get in legal trouble if we do it. So, like, we're sorry, guys. We're sympathetic with your cause, but we just can't do it. Like, one of the things that I've noticed in recent years, a lot of the payment processors were trying to prevent the purchase of legal firearms, right? Like, again, they can't pass this through the Senate, right? Like, it's illegal to go against the Second Amendment. And so they're trying to launder it and do, like, this banking activism bullshit. Free speech, another example. Like, they would go after people that are inconveniencing, after populists, both the left and the right. All of a sudden, they find out that they're debanked. And so there was pushback against it. I think, like, they're going to keep trying. I think, especially with the conservative administration, they may try to do this with porn, because no one wants to defend porn. And once you have the system in place, once you have like the apparatus necessary to learn how to debank properly, and you normalize the concept of debanking, then you slowly, start encroaching from that. Like a lot of the authoritarianism. This is probably one of the reasons why porn will never get banned, because it's like really great as a scapegoat to push for authoritarianism, right? No one wants to defend it. Everyone wants to stay away from it. And so any authoritarian law can be passed. It's like, oh yeah, we're protecting kids, or we're cracking down on harmful content, like whatever the fuck, right? But then the scope of the law is actually worse than what it set out to do. And so this is why I think that part is going to get banned, and it's also how I think that the banks are going to try in the future to get a little bit more soft power. Because again, when you have a lot of money, like the next thing that's missing is soft power, right? And being able to decide what goes on in a society without actually making a law, is a power that a lot of people would like to have. And so, yeah, let me know what you guys think. And as usual, I will see you in the comment section. Take care.